Hello. Boarding in progress. All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's June 17th, 2021 for those watching in the future. And we're excited today to have a chance to sit together and go over all things contract to close. So this is really about today to help share some best tips and practices and conversation about the process of once you have a contract, getting through a successful closing and how to manage that. And I've brought in an expert that I've known and worked with for many years now, um, Nicole with Dotted and Crossed. She is the owner and creator of Dotted and Crossed, and I'm going to turn things over to her, if you will, and let her lead us on this journey and looking at how to use a contract to close or create a contract to close process. And then also at the end, she's going to share if you choose or desire to outsource contract to close to Dotted and Crossed, what do they do for that and how does that work? But today also we want to make sure we arm you with the tools of doing it yourself as well. So I am no further ado, Nicole, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Teddy. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate you guys asking me. As Teddy said, I'm the owner of Dotted and Crossed Transaction Coordination. We launched in January of 2018, and since then we've closed over 3,000 transactions. And that's in over 3 different states. So we've seen a lot of stuff. We've seen a lot of different things pop up on a lot of transactions. And because of that, just the sheer volume of things that we've seen and you can predict what's going to happen during the contract process about probably 90% of the time, right? You can predict, you can follow along and know what's going to happen. But there's always that 10% of like, you never know. Is it going to follow the terms of the contract, or are there going to be wild cards in there? And so having a system, having a checklist, and having something that you can fall back on and follow throughout that entire process is what's going to make the difference for your client's experience during that process. And it's going to mean whether or not they had a good experience, which means more repeat and referral business for you, or if they had a really bad experience and God forbid next time they sell for sale by owner, right? Like it could happen. That's where most of the for sale by owners that I talk to actually come from, are people who had a bad experience with an agent. And it could be that the agent was doing their best, but they didn't have a good system in place. And that contract process is an absolute nightmare. So what I want to talk to you today is about how to build that system, what to actually look for, what you need to be doing from the day it goes under contract until the day it closes, what that needs to look like, and then how to build a scalable and repeatable system to track that moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you guys can see, and I'm going to kind of split things here because I do have a PowerPoint that I have here, but I'm also going to be showing you things on the side as well. So day one, you have a brand new binding contract, just went under contract, just bound, and you're so excited. It's for your buyers, wonderful. Everybody is very excited. So the first thing is going to be, now what? What do you do first? I'm going to split the contract to close process into 3 main phases. The first phase is really going to be all about your setup. You are setting up your contract for success to make it smooth and easy throughout the process. The first thing that I want to actually mention, it's going to seem very mundane. And for most realtors, this is like the worst. This is like pulling teeth. This is not necessarily something that most agents enjoy doing, but getting all of your documents together and creating a naming structure and having a place that you house all of your documents. You can use Google Drive. You can use Dropbox. I don't recommend storing your documents in Transaction Desk because we find it to be very clunky. We find it to be very difficult to, when you need to quickly go in and pull something, or if you're on your phone and you need to share something, have all of your fully executed documents in a separate cloud platform that you can access them on your phone or on your computer. You can use Google Drive, you can use Dropbox, and you can have a folder for your active contracts and your closed contracts, and then create a structure in there for each property address as it goes under contract. So for example, so our naming structure, so we split out all of the documents separately. So if you receive one big package from the other side that has all of the documents in there, guess what? You can't submit that to Village. You have to split out the documents into their individual components to be able to upload them to Village for them to check them for compliance. So go ahead and do that on the front end so that you can actually get an idea of what it is that you're looking for. So we label our documents.
Nicole, 1 second. May I ask, could you move your presentation to the center, or are you wanting to show us your calendar as well?
I am going to show you I'm actually going to be pulling up a thing over here. What I'll do is I'll minimize.
Perfect, no problem. I wanted them to be able to see that. Can everyone see what's on her screen there as large as you need to, as far as the details of the presentation? Perfect. Okay, sorry, Nicole, go ahead. All good.
Okay, so I've got this beautiful contract here. Teddy Pins is the selling agent, and it's this, great big package. Like, what am I going to do with this? I need to get this, be able to submit through Village. If you're a Mac user, this is actually very, very easy. If you are not a Mac user, there are several other programs you can use to split PDFs pretty easily, but I'm going to show you how to do it in a Mac. What you would do is you would just go show your thumbnail view, and then from here, you can actually just pull your documents out onto your desktop. So I just go start at the bottom and pull that compensation agreement. I'm going to scroll up. I'm going to grab my property condition disclosure. I hit Shift to select all of the documents that I wanted in that. There is my lead-based paint disclosure. I'm going to pull that out. There's my confirmation of agency status. Looks like an addendum for furniture. We'll leave that in with the contract, because that looks like that belongs. Addendum 1. Okay, there's our addendum with all the furniture. And then we have our purchase and sale agreement here. So I'm going to select that one. I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to scroll down to the last page of that addendum here. And then I'm going to drag those out. So now all of those documents are nicely on my desktop, and I just have to label them. So what I can do is I can go in here, I can hit spacebar, and I can see this is my bound contract for 607 Fifth Avenue West. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 607 Fifth Avenue West hyphen. I'm going to copy this so that I only have to type that one time, and I'm going to put it down PSA. This is the confirmation of agency status. I can see I've already got both parties' signatures on there, so this is fully executed. So with our naming structure, what we do is SX means seller executed. That means that the seller has signed it, but I know I'm still missing buyer signatures. BX would mean that the buyer has signed it, but the seller has not. So when you label your document, what I would do is I would actually have a way to label your document so that before you even open it, you know exactly what it is, right? Be consistent about your labeling structure, because this is going to save you so much time, so much energy, so much headache. It seems like it's a lot of work on the front end, but I promise as soon as you get the hang of just kind of having, of labeling your documents and having everything organized, it makes everything so much easier. So I'll show you again, confirmation of agency status, lead-based paint disclosure. This one is also fully executed. So I'm just going to lead-based paint disclosure. This is the property condition disclosure, and I can see that we've also got this one fully executed. And then this is the compensation agreement. This one is buyer executed. We have the selling agent signature. We don't have the listing agent signature. So we'll call that agreement BX. So now I know I need to upload that one back in the transaction desk and send it out for signature, right? So I know exactly what's going on with that one. So once you have all your documents, then the next thing you want to do, obviously, you want to pull your Village checklist up, and you want to actually go through and make sure you actually have everything. Okay, I've got my bound contract. I don't have my compensation agreement fully signed yet. You want to go through and be like, oh, I don't have my disclaimer notice. I don't have my trusted service providers. Do all this stuff on the front end. Number one, it makes you look good to your client that you're getting all of the paperwork right after you go under contract instead of scrambling the day or two before closing. Trust me, it makes you look better. It makes a better experience for your client. They don't feel rushed in terms of reading and going through all these documents and signing everything. So going through and actually pulling, what do you have? We don't have this yet. We don't have this yet. We don't have this yet. We don't need a personal interest disclosure. We don't have a buyer rep agreement yet. Oh no, we have to get that. We have the confirmation of agency status. We have the property condition disclosure. We have the lead-based paint, right? And then you have your village specific forms, the authorization and indemnification, as you should know. So this is required if you are representing the seller. Village requires this. On the buy side, it's only required if the property is a full gut renovation or new construction. So you'll have to determine whether or not this one applies on your contract. You always have to have the trusted service providers form, that's also village. And then also if you are charging your clients the base commission through village, the 150, you want to make sure you have that base commission disclosure in there as well, filled out correctly. So again, I know super mundane, super boring. This is like the least sexy part of the process. I know that, but I promise you it makes your life a lot easier if you just go ahead and kind of focus on having an organized system to get all of your documents together. Once you have that, that's all just set up. We're just now under contract. Okay, let me get organized. Now what are we doing? The next thing that you're going to want to do is calculate your performance deadlines. So to do this, as we know from our purchase and sale agreement lines 416, in the event of a performance deadline, should the last day fall on a Saturday, Sunday, or federally recognized holiday, you will not have a deadline on that day. It will automatically extend to the following business day. And I can show you exactly what to do, what I do, and what that looks like. All right, so I'm going to go to my bound purchase and sale agreement. For the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see what my actual binding agreement date is. Oh, this is actually not bound. Look at that. Let me go into the one that I actually have saved here. Let's see if this one. Here we go. Okay. So we're just going to go with this one here. 607 5th Avenue West. Here we go. So we have our counter one bound, and it looks like that was bound on April 25th. And closing date should be June 1st. So I know April 25th is the day I'm working on. I'm gonna make sure my calendar is on the right here. So I know, first of all, I know my closing date is June 1st. So I'm gonna put that on my calendar, right? I'm gonna go 607 5th Avenue West, closing date. I don't have a closing appointment set yet because it's a little early for that, but that's when our scheduled closing date is. So the first performance deadline, does anybody know what the first, if you have a finance contingency on the contract, typically what one of the first two performance deadlines are?
Ooh, I love this question. Who's gonna get it?
No?
Earnest money?
Earnest money is usually the first if you do 3 days. Yes, typically earnest money. If you put 5 days, or depending on what day it actually is bound, you might also go in line with the loan obligations. Your loan application is also due 3 days from the binding agreement date as well. Now, if the buyer submitted a pre-approval letter that says, based on your loan application submission, your buyer is pre-approved up to X dollars, right? You can then reasonably concur that the buyer has indeed submitted the loan application because you have that pre-approval letter on file, right? But if you know that the buyer is shopping lenders, now in this market, most likely if you're under contract, the buyer is not shopping lenders, or if you know that, you have a pre-qualification letter and it's not clear on that letter, it just states that, that they've had a conversation with the lender and they said, yeah, I make $1 million a year. But they haven't necessarily submitted all of their income verification documents. They haven't had a credit report pulled, all of that stuff. You want to verify with the lender that 3 days from binding agreement that the loan application has been submitted. So that's going to be the first one on a financing contingency most of the time, and it usually does fall on the same day as the earnest money deadline because most people do 3 days for the earnest money. So with our binding agreement date of April 25th, 3 days from then would be, so that's a Saturday, so 1, 2, 3, So that is going to be our loan application deadline. So I'm going to copy paste and I'm going to put loan application due. Because I don't have a pre-approval letter, so I want to make sure I check in with the lender on that, right? And then what I would do too, when you're adding these dates to your calendars, I would add a notification for yourself. So that first thing in the morning when you're getting ready, you're getting a notification on your calendar like, oh yeah, I have this deadline today, I need to check on that. And then you can go through, as you're going through your contract stuff, make sure that you're following up on that. So then let's see what our earnest money deadline is. Earnest money is due 4 days after binding agreement to retitle and escrow. So on that one, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So we know it's going to be 1 day later. So we're going to do our earnest money due. And you can even do, to make it easy on yourself, you can do, write in how much the earnest money is, right? And that way, when you're checking your calendar, you can check in with your client again and be like, hey, just want to make sure you got the earnest money in. And they're like, oh yeah, can you remind me of who do I need to make that out to? Make it easy on yourself. Have some notes easily available for you, right? So we have our loan application. We have our earnest money. What if this was a cash deal? Does anybody know the performance deadline for a cash transaction?
The proof of funds?
Exactly. Yes, proof of funds. And proof of funds is due 5 days from binding agreement. And that is for, hold on, there it is. Buyer will furnish proof of available funds to close in the following manner. So bank statement, lender's commitment letter within 5 days after binding agreement. So if your financing was waived, you would have a deadline for your proof of funds due. Now, again, keep in mind, in this market, most of the time as an agent, you are probably getting this stuff on the front end, or you should be, because because of how low the inventory is and how competitive the market is, having all of your ducks in a row before you even submit the offer is going to be setting your client up for success. But we all know that every once in a while this will happen, or you will be working with an agent, their client maybe submitted the best offer, but they don't have all their ducks in a row and they haven't given you proof of funds on the front end. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, the buyer is, they're transferring money around and I'll get that to you, right? Well, you need to know exactly what that hard deadline is that they have to have that proof of funds in, and you need to be making sure you're following up on it on the off chance that you don't get that. So the next performance deadline is typically the way most people write the contracts is related to the inspection, but there are also 2 other hard deadlines in the contract that are not variable, that are related to the financing contingency. Does anybody know when the appraisal, the buyer must request for the appraisal to be ordered by in the event of a financing contingency? No takers. 14 days, and that is in the appraisal section here. Hold on, here we go. Under the buyer's loan obligations, within 14 days after binding agreement date, buyer shall warrant and represent to the seller via notification form or a written equivalent notice. That means that you can send an email. Buyer has secured evidence of hazard insurance, which will be effective at closing. So literally we have a deadline that within 14 days of binding agreement, if there is a financing contingency, the buyer must submit evidence of hazard insurance to the lender. Now, we all know that a lender is not going to allow a buyer to submit or a buyer to close without insurance, right? That's obvious. So why do you think this is a deadline in the contract? This is basically just a way for the seller to have some kind of proof that the buyer is actually doing their due diligence on the loan, that things are actually happening according to the loan process. We have in fact had deals held up because the buyer has not submitted hazard insurance on time. And that's part of the reason why we always follow up on this deadline every single time. So, what you would want to do then is 14 days from binding agreement, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So another 7 days is going to put that on Sunday, the 9th. What that actually does, because of our performance deadline clause in the contract, that's actually going to bump that deadline to Monday the 10th for the hazard insurance here.
I can't echo enough how important it is to, it's one of the beauties of outsourcing contract closing that I know that Nicole's team, they check all of these things. And it's always been my best practice that I do that, but let's face it,
it's one that
these become some of the pieces that fall to the wayside of us babysitting the other side, right? But essentially, that's how we help protect our client, that things are moving along, because you can't trust that the other side is asking their client. We know that the buyer signed the contract and didn't read the language. They don't know those deadlines. You may have sent them an email telling them all of those, but they've got so much going on. They're worried about movers and packers and excuse me. So it's so important to follow up and put these in your calendar and just check in with the other side to make sure.
So I want to actually tell you a story about another reason why this deadline is so important, especially in this current market situation. So we had a contract. We were represented the seller on this contract, and we were on, I think, day 16 or day 17, and we had reached out asking for evidence of hazard insurance and never got a response. Notified our agent, let them know, like, hey, just so you know, we asked about hazard insurance, lender didn't respond, we are past that deadline, just kind of want to let you know. The listing agent actually got a significantly higher offer while we were already under contract. And basically, because the buyer was not doing their due diligence, we submitted a notification, like basically giving them 24 hours. You have not followed the terms of the contract and actually done this. We were able to get out of that contract and go with the higher offer, being based on saying that the buyer was not doing their due diligence. So this is one of those deadlines that it's not important until it becomes the most important thing, right? Like, it's one of those things that, like, 99% of the time, insurance is not going to be something that's going to make or break your deal. But when it is, it becomes the most important thing. And that's why it's so, so important to follow up on. I will tell you that 90% of the agents that we work with in Tennessee aren't even aware it's a deadline in the contract. They're never asking about it. They're never following up. And I think that that's honestly a shame that we don't, are actually reading our contracts and actually, realizing, like, this is an actual performance deadline that they are contractually agreeing to do. Are they doing it? If you're not checking on that, you're not doing your service to your client. So just wanted to share that. At the same time as the hazard insurance, buyer has notified lender of an intent to proceed, has available funds to close, and has requested that the appraisal be ordered and affirms that the appraisal fee has been paid. So note that this doesn't say that the appraisal must be ordered within 14 days. It has to state that the buyer has requested that or given permission for the lender to order the appraisal. So that is a key difference there. We typically treat it as has the lender ordered the appraisal for just ease of use. Where it really matters that if the buyer has requested is if you have a new construction contract and you wrote it, or the other side wrote it on the standard TAR form, you still have these deadlines in there, even though it's new construction and it might not be closing for 6 months. Number one, if you have new construction, use the new construction TAR form because it's different for a reason. It does make a big difference, or use the builder contract. But if you're using the standard TAR form on a new construction that's 3 to 6 months out, you have these kinds of things that, like, okay, now we're just intentionally not following the terms of the contract unless we actually do follow up on these items and make sure that they happen. So 14 days. So what I actually do on the appraisal order and hazard insurance is I actually put them in the same task. Hazard insurance due, appraisal order. And I know in my head when I'm writing that in, that it's buyer requests the appraisal be ordered, not that the lender has to say the appraisal has been ordered. So that's just kind of more for our understanding. So then the next performance deadline is typically, we got earnest money, we've got appraisal order, hazard insurance. So typically next is going to be your inspection period, which is arguably the most important, only because this is really what can determine whether or not your buyer can walk away and get a full refund of earnest money if the inspection is terrible. If you miss this deadline, it's going to be one of the most expensive mistakes of your career most of the time, unless you get really, really lucky. So this is definitely one that is not to be messed around with. So we have here 7 days from binding agreement. Again, our binding agreement date was the 25th. So 7 days, it puts us on Sunday the 2nd. Again, now remember, line 413, 416 through 419 says that in the event of a performance deadline, we will not have one fall on a Saturday, Sunday, or federally recognized holiday. So I know that that's going to go to Monday the 3rd. That is going to be my deadline. Note that not every agent knows this language, and I'm actually just going to pull it up here so that you can see it for yourself. Not every agent knows this language here, and I'm going to zoom in. In the event of a performance deadline other than the closing date, date of possession, completion of repair deadline, that's what's in the repair amendment when you put the number of days for the repairs to be completed, and the offer expiration. Those are the only exceptions to this. If it occurs on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, the performance deadline shall extend to the following business day. So, and then it actually defines federal holidays are used herein are those deemed federal holidays pursuant to US, I don't know how to say that correctly, so I'm not even going to try. So this is where that says, so if you ever get pushback from an agent who is like, your repair proposal was due on Saturday, you're accepting it as is. No, it's not. Unless you actually wrote in the offer in the special stipulations, count all days to be counted as calendar days, then your special stipulations would override your contract. But if this is your default, you will never have a deadline fall, your repair proposal or repair amendment fall on a Saturday or Sunday, period. Not gonna happen, it's right here. So because of that, I'm confident I can tell you that our repair proposal is due on the 3rd. That means it has to be submitted on or before the 3rd. Now, our resolution period is 5 days, but I'm not going to go ahead and add that repair resolution deadline yet because this is 5 days from the day that we submit the proposal. If we happen to have the home inspection tomorrow and get the inspection report and we submit the repair proposal late tomorrow night, then that means it's going to be 5 days from from tomorrow, not 5 days from the 3rd that amendment is due, right? So you have to count the days from the day you actually submit the proposal. Your deadline is the 3rd to get it in. If you wait until then it's going to be 5 days from the 3rd, but that's a very important distinction. So I'm actually going to hold off. I'm going to make a note in my calendar invite that it says 5 days. So that way I know that I can add that deadline once I do submit that proposal. I know when to start counting the days from that deadline, right? Then the next deadlines that you will have in the contract are typically your closing date, possession date, and then the number of days for final walkthrough prior to closing. So our closing date here, this says May 20th, but I saw in counter one, we're closing on June 1st. So we know, that's fine. Let's see here. And possession is going to be at closing. We don't have an occupancy agreement on this one. Again, of course, in this market, we're seeing a lot of temporary occupancy agreements. If you did have a occupancy agreement in place, put that possession date and time on your calendar as an appointment. So oh yeah, 12 o'clock on June 10th is when buyers take possession. So that way you have a note for yourself. I need to schedule a walkthrough with them to exchange keys, make sure everything is good, all that kind of stuff. When you have an occupancy agreement, put that deadline on your calendar of when that occupancy is up. So those are all of your performance deadlines that you'd have on your calendar. Again, we're still in the setup phase of the contract to close process. But does anybody have any questions on how to calculate deadlines or anything about that section? Nope. Okay, I'm going to keep on going. So the next thing that you would want to do after you get all this, all your documents organized, you have all your deadlines, the next thing you want to do is send out your missing documents for signature. We kind of already touched on this, but don't forget your village required documents, trusted service providers, base commission disclosure if you're collecting that, authorization and waivers and indemnification if needed. Set up your file in Vement, add your checklist and upload all of your documents. Go ahead and get this done. Get this taken care of on the front end. It's going to save you so much stress down the line, having to, make sure you might miss a signature on the compensation agreement, right? And then you're having to get that at the last minute. It's a lot easier to just do this on the front end when you're getting your file all set up. Be very organized and methodical about this. Then if you're on the buy side, you want to make sure you get your inspection scheduled within that deadline. So, whether you have your buyer choose their home inspector and you schedule it for them, whether you recommend 3 home inspectors to them and, let them choose from there, or whether you just say, this is my guy, this is who I trust, I think we should always go with him, and that's how you sell it. That's your call as the agent. but getting the inspection scheduled and then the ancillary inspections that you recommend as an agent. I would always go, home inspection, termite, and radon just as the standard base. Personally, I don't think radon is something to mess with, but that's something that for you to decide how to advise your client as their agent, whether or not you will recommend a radon inspection. So getting all of those scheduled, HVAC if needed, sewer scope, anything else that, septic inspection that you might need, making sure all of those are scheduled, have those as appointments, right, on your calendar. Here's one right here. Have those as appointments on your calendar when those inspections are happening. And then you want to notify the other side, notify the listing agent, make sure that they know when all the inspections are happening and that they are confirmed with the sellers, especially if the property is occupied, right? You need to note that, make sure that the seller has actually confirmed that the inspection date and time are acceptable if the property is occupied. Because the last thing you want is for the inspector to show up and the seller to have no idea that there was anybody coming, and it's a mess. It's never a good thing when that happens. So schedule the inspections and confirm that. Then you need to make sure that everybody who's involved on this transaction has a copy of the contract and knows what's going on. So, reaching out to the lender, making sure that they have you as a point of contact, making sure they have a copy of the contract, reaching out to your title company, make sure you include your commission, any fees that you're charging, and your client's contact information when you send the contract to the title company. Those are the minimum things that they have to have. I have talked to agents. I literally talked to an agent yesterday who he was interested in looking to outsource his transaction coordination. He's a very successful agent. He'd been doing it on his own for years. And he had a contract that he forgot to send to the title company until the day before closing. And he represented the seller. They had no time to pull the payoff. They had no time, we had to delay closing because he didn't send the contract to the title company. So it happens, right? These things can slip through the cracks and you don't actually have a system and a checklist. You have all these things that you need to do and you can check them off. Then once you have the basic down where, okay, I've sent it to the lender, I've sent it to the title company, I've sent it to the other agent, and I've notified them of the inspections. The next level would be verifying that they actually received them, because sometimes we all know, things can drown in your inbox. People miss things, right? Especially with title company emails, sometimes things get missed. So lender sent the email to the lender the next day. I haven't heard from the lender. Hey, lender, did you get my email with the contract? Just making sure, that you received it. Hey, title company, can you please confirm receipt of this contract? We've had it happen where we send a contract to the title company. They never confirmed receipt. They never actually got it before. So now we always confirm receipt, make sure that they say got it. And that means following up until they say got it, or calling, right? Reaching back out to the cooperating agent, like, hey, I sent you the inspection schedule. Did you confirm that with your sellers? Are we good for Monday at 2 o'clock, right? Making sure that they also have that together. So that's the next level of follow-up to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. Then you want to make sure that you send an intro email to your client and that they know everything that's going to happen. What are their performance deadlines? When are their inspections scheduled? What do they need to do? And I would, have a template of email that you basically fill in the blanks of everything that applies. Okay, here's our cover page of the contract with all of the highlights, our purchase price, our earnest money, our closing attorney, our inspection deadline, all of our performance deadlines, all of that information right there. I would have that in like an Excel sheet that I download, and I would email that to them as like, here is a cover sheet of your file that has all of the highlights on it. And here's what you need to do. You need to get your earnest money in by this day, this amount to this person. Having this all in an email and then calling your client and going over it all over the phone is going to make you look so good to your client. It means that they're going to know, they're going to be confident that you know what you're doing and that nothing is going to drop through the cracks. And it's going to take down a lot of that stress that they have right now because they're wanting to pack and move and deal with all of the stress that comes with moving, right? So that makes a big difference. So once you've set up your file, you have all of your deadlines, all of your documents, you've communicated with all parties. Now we're kind of going into the maintenance mode of the maintenance phase of the contract. And this is basically where we will track all of the performance deadlines. So if you're on the seller side, checking in on the day the earnest money arrived, hey, or on the day the earnest money is due, has it been received? Make sure you get a copy of it. if you're on the buy side, make sure you get a copy of the earnest money to the lender because they need that for underwriting. If you're on the listing side, make sure your sellers know that the buyers are doing their due diligence, right? Same thing for loan application. If you don't have confirmation that they've submitted their loan application, let your sellers know, hey, just wanted to let you know the buyers are doing their due diligence. They have submitted their loan application, their earnest money is in on time. Checking in, with the lender, has the appraisal been ordered? Great, the appraisal is ordered. Okay, has the appraisal been scheduled? I haven't heard from the appraiser. Other agent, have you heard from the appraiser? Has anybody heard from the appraiser? It was ordered last week. And then once you finally find out when that appraisal is scheduled, putting that deadline on your calendar so that making sure that your sellers know when that appraisal is happening. Then going back to the lender, when do you expect to have that appraisal report back? If the lender says, oh yeah, the appraisal is due, in 2 weeks and we're closing in 2.5 weeks, that would be some red flags. And I would be asking the lender, hey, you're telling me that the appraisal report is due 4 days prior to the closing date. Is that going to hold up closing? So you can kind of try to catch these red flags when you're staying on top of your transaction, being proactive and asking these questions on the front end. It's going to show any red flags that basically can prevent you from having any delays in your deal. Right. So when you find out, okay, the appraisal is scheduled for Tuesday, when is the report due back? And the lender says the report is due back, 5 days from closing. Okay, is that going to cause any delays in our transaction? Oh, well, maybe it could. So then prompts you to go ahead and start that negotiation conversation with the other agent. Hey, the appraisal is super delayed. We might have to delay closing, and kind of giving everybody that heads up so that it's not such a shock in case it does happen, right? These things make a huge difference throughout the process and give your client a much better experience. Has the buyer submitted proof of hazard insurance? We've already been over that one, so I'm not going to mention that again. So you're kind of just going through as these deadlines are popping up and making sure that you're following up on all of them and that you can check them off your list. Prepare and submit your repair proposal, or in this market, your as-is notification, which is what we're seeing most of the time. If you are submitting a repair proposal, at the same time, pull the pages from the inspection report that correspond with those repairs, because the seller might need specific photos, right? Do your due diligence here. You can pull out pages of the inspection report the same way I split out the pages of the contract. Pull out those pages that line up with the items that you're requesting to be repaired, save them separately so that you can send them to the listing agent and that they have them so you know that the repairs are done properly. Track your repair amendment deadline based on the day that you actually submitted that proposal. So again, 5 days from the day we submitted the proposal is the day that the amendment is due. Then make sure you get that fully executed amendment, or you do an amendment to extend if you need additional time to negotiate. Then verify that you received the appraisal report. Again, in this market, most of the time, even if there is an appraisal contingency, the buyer is paying any over, if it comes in under value, buyers having to pay that overage. I'm seeing a few deals now and there where we are renegotiating in the event of a low appraisal, but regardless of whether or not the value of the appraisal actually matters to the deal, if you don't have the appraisal report back in time to close, you're not closing on time, right? So, this is something that applies even if your appraisal contingency is waived. If you have a financing contingency on the contract, you actually still have to be tracking that appraisal report because you have to make sure it comes in on time for us to close, right? So that would be the next one. And then once you're kind of through all of your contingencies, at that point, we're getting, into the closing phase. So this would be where we would make sure that your buyers have the utility providers, right? All the utility providers, they know when to schedule the utilities to start. Do you have an occupancy agreement in place? If so, you want to make sure they start the utilities on the day they are taking possession of the property, and that the sellers have those utilities continue through that day. Making sure that the loan is still moving forward, that we're out of underwriting, that we have conditional approval, et cetera, that we're, moving forward. Checking back in with Village, logging back into VMIT, make sure you have all of those documents submitted and see if you're missing anything. Verifying that any repairs have been completed, asking for those receipts, etc. Scheduling the final walkthrough, confirming that with all parties, making sure it works with your client and to make sure it works with the other side. Scheduling the closing and then sending a confirmation email with the closing time and the location to your clients. And then reviewing the preliminary ALTA, making sure that matches all of the terms of your contract. Who's paying title expenses? If your seller is paying title expenses, but they bought the house 5 years ago, did you get the credit for having the original title policy, right? These are things that you can do to save your clients money if you catch these on the front end, knowing going into the contract. I'm reviewing the Alta. I know my seller is paying title expenses. I also sold them this house 5 years ago. I need to grab that original title policy and make sure that they get that reissue credit. That can save them up to 30% on their new title policy. Once you do have closing, verify that everything funds and that you can, safely exchange the keys so that your buyers can take possession, your sellers are fully out of the house, whichever side you're on. And then congratulate your clients, right? After closing, it's not over. Follow up with your clients after they have a successful closing. Ask them for referrals, ask them for a review, for a testimonial. This is where the money is at. This is where you're going to build your business, is not just dropping off the face of the earth once you leave the closing table. And then upload your final closing documents to Village, and make sure that the title company sends the hard copies and the copy of your check to the correct Village office, and then get paid. So these are this is kind of the condensed closing stuff. That's, all of the extra pieces that you want to make sure are falling into place. Now, see, all of the stuff that has to happen here, like typically in the last 2 weeks of closing, if you were still trying to go through and chase down documents and label things and find the confirmation of agency status and the lead-based Kate disclosure, and then you multiply this times, I have 5 pending contracts right now, it can very quickly become very, very overwhelming, and it's very easy for things to be dropped. Like, the very successful agent that I talked to that just forgot to send the contract to the title company, right? Like the other, very busy, very successful buyer's agent that didn't stay on top of their buyers and make sure they got hazard insurance in on time. These things can happen even when you have the best of intentions if you don't have a checklist in place. So what I would do is I would take all of these steps that I've broken down and I would put them into an Excel spreadsheet or some type of digital checklist. And then you have a checklist for each property address that you have. And you're actually checking them off as you go, as things get completed. Don't check it off until you know it's been done. So that way you have a duplicatable, repeatable process, right, that you can use every single time. And then of course your other option is you can always outsource. Right? You can always hire an outside TC. Basically, everything that I've talked to you about, tracking all of the deadlines, everything except the actual negotiation, are things that we do for you. I've dotted and crossed. Because again, even if you have the best of intentions, this could still be you, where you completely miss a deadline, you drop a ball, you miss count days, or you just had a really crazy day of showings and stuff and just forgot. So it is possible to be a successful agent and to do your own transactions. I'm not saying that that's not possible. The problem there is there's a cap on how much you can actually do. So this is really what's going to depend on your goal. If your goal is to close, 10, 12 transactions a year and you're good, and you're going to space them out over the course of the year and you have 1 transaction at a time, by all means, I'm not going to say you have to have a TC to be successful, because you can absolutely do this yourself. If you don't have a lot going on, maybe you don't have a family, maybe, you don't have much else to do and you kind of just live life and this is what you love the details and it's not a problem. That's great. But if you want to get to that next level, if you want to be a millionaire real estate agent, you want to close, 3 million, 10 million, et cetera, it's basically impossible to do that and be a really good agent and do all of this back end stuff well at the same time and giving your clients that really great experience. And the way it works when you do hire and when you do outsource your transactions, we charge per transaction that's paid upon a successful closing. If the file terminates, we only charge a termination processing fee if you want us to do the paperwork for the termination. Otherwise, it's completely free. So there's no risk involved with outsourcing your transaction coordination. If your file terminates, you don't have to pay an assistant regardless of what's happening in your business, in your life. It's only per contract. So it's a very, very easy, low risk solution to having to deal with all of this and figure out the system yourself. And I think that's pretty much all I have. But does anybody have any questions as far as like how to build the system, if you wanted to go about doing it yourself, any specific questions about any of this?
Well, and I'll share a little bit from my experience. Well, if y'all thinking on any questions, or this is an impeccable time to ask. Um, but I've been in the business almost 19, I think almost 20 years. And I have had, I've done it myself. I've done it for other agents. And I have also hired and had a full-time contract to close, like, or an assistant, and that was part of their task originally when I hired an assistant was, well, let's give them the contract to close because it's the most repeatable, regimented process that we do. And so, as Nicole mentioned, it's really important to come up with a system if you're going to do it yourself so that you can be really consistent in replicating the tasks, be it the standardized emails that you're going to send to people. There's some ways you can do that in Google to have email templates. And Rebecca's given some, she's done some tech tips and shown you all that over video. If you want to, so you just want to create a new email like, hey, congrats, or let's get ready to close. Like those can all be templates in Gmail.
Yeah, Gmail templates are fantastic and free. You can save anything that you write as a canned email and then reuse that. And also the task, like Gmail also has a task tracker too. So like if you receive an email and it's a to-do thing, there's a lot of free tools that you can use that make it super, super simple. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Teddy.
Right. No, that's great. But what I would say is that if you're going to outsource it, the value for outsourcing, and I'd say this whether Nicole was on this call or not, is tremendous. It really is. For the few $100s to do it, it really is worth it. And they've given preferential pricing to Village, so you can take advantage of that if you choose. But it really allows you to focus on the things that you likely do best, and that is build relationships and be in community. Most realtors are, love to meet people and network and show houses and put together deals. And then when it comes to the paperwork, it's just a thorn in their side. And the beauty is, prior to, I would say 5 years ago, there weren't really outsourced C2C. You had to figure it out yourself, or you had to hire a full-time administrator. And a lot of people that weren't doing, 40 deals a year, that was cost prohibitive. And so it was just this painful process of like dealing with it. And it took you out of your rhythm and flow of prospecting. And that's where I think you really want to be mindful that outsourcing C2C is a real benefit so that you can focus on what you do best. Now you get to choose what you do with that time. So of course, by not doing your C2C work, what are you doing with that with respect to building your business or working on the business versus what we call working in the business? So I just think it's an awesome resource and tool for you, whatever company you choose to go with. Like I said, I've explored many of them. There are great C2C companies out there. I've had incredible experience with Nicole and her team. And I don't have to worry too that if, like, for some reason, when I had an admin doing all my contract to close, if they got sick or maternity leave or vacations or problems, like this now is Nicole's problem to figure out how to staff and train and keep the consistency amongst her team if for some reason the person that handles mine under her, something were to happen. And I always used to say that, with my clients as well, is that, if I get hit by the bus, that's not my client's fault. The home still must close, right? And so I want to have systems and I want to save my files in a way that if something happened to me, they can pick it right back up, right? So I love that she started with that consistency in how you save your files. That I think is one of the biggest things is you just got to at least get organized with how you're saving things so that it's easily when you need something, because your clients are going to call you, you're going to need something, that you're not having to frantic to scatter that, oh my God, I know I have that, where is it? So that's the first and foremost thing is that, and I preach this with teams all the time, is when you get an email, the first thing you do is save as with that attachment, right? Or you put it in a folder.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of the simplest things, and it seems like it's like, why is this so important? But like seriously, sometimes those little tiny details, doing that on the front end, it makes a massive difference. like people do lose things in their email all the time. Like lenders, you can send something to the lender and they'd be like, oh, I can't find that. Can you send it again? Same with title companies, et cetera. So having that at your fingertips when you're in the thick of things, when you're between back-to-back showings and listing appointments, and you have to get this thing out. If you don't have that in somewhere easily accessible, like it just makes it way more stressful for you and could potentially cause, like delays in the contract, like there's all kinds of things that could happen if you don't do those very simple things and just organizing, label your files, and then put all your deadlines on the calendar. Those are the things that you can do to set yourself up for success very easily.
Do we have any questions or feedback or thoughts? Appropriately overwhelmed?
For you guys, did anybody learn something? I would love to hear if anybody had any ahas or learned anything.
Any takeaways? You can do it. Unmute yourself. Even if you're not on camera, it's okay.
Just some of the extra contract or the contract language that I haven't dove into. That was super helpful. And I recently just switched over to using dotted and crossed, and it's been awesome and seamless.
Awesome. I was gonna say, Dana, I was like, yeah, I recognized you whenever you walked on. I was like, oh, sweet.
Yeah. So, and I mean, like, yeah, I feel like I know this process really well. I know the contracts, everything, but I still learn new things. And there was, contract language, dates still pointed out that were new, or refreshing to me or whatever. And then, just as far as working with Elisa, it's been awesome. So, and they've been so quick to get me on board and then get everything going. It took no time at all. So it's been great.
Appreciate the feedback. That's awesome.
Anybody else? All right, well, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions, concerns, or needs to any of your brokers, your mentors, myself. And then, if you just want to explore that process of what does that look like? What does that cost? How does this work? You can reach out to Nicole with dottedandcross.net. And she's fantastic. Like I said, the best thing to do is get ahead of it before you get in the weeds with it, because quickly that can become a tearful experience like filing taxes, and it just doesn't have to be that bad. And
that's a comparison.
I mean, really, like it doesn't have to be that bad. There were 3 bad words in my business for a long time, and it was taxes, website, and database. And the best thing I did was when I outsourced my bookkeeping, right? I got to a place where it was like, I can't keep up with this. This is madness. Now, there's a lot more tools and things than there were necessarily 20 years ago, but still, it was something that was a major stress in my life. And I recognized I had to figure out a different or better way. And I now don't have to have a full-time administrator doing contract to close. We can focus on many other things that build the business rather than these important details, which they do better than I ever could. Or even honestly, that I was training a full-time person to do, because this is all they do. All they do. So they are way on top of the details, even more so than my in-house person ever was in making sure the other side was meeting those deadlines.
Thank you. That's actually something I do want to mention is, with our team and with a lot of the contract to close teams out here, but we require at least a year of experience in the real estate world before anybody comes to work with us. So we, in general, we have a lot of experience. Like I myself, I've been doing this for, since 2013. I was just an assistant for a long time. So we've accumulated a lot of experience and seen a lot of things. So it allows us to be very, very proactive when we are managing your files. And again, pointing out those red flags before they become an issue, as opposed to just reacting to all these new possible things that could pop up. Can really make the difference between closing on time or closing at all in some cases.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. Appreciate you, your business, your stewardship of our industry. And I really, really appreciate you. So thanks again, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye. Appreciate you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.